So this is one of the CO2 supplemented tanks that I did. This is a 45-gallon cube. It's all immersed plants at first. So these were all plants that I grew on land before I put them in water. So the health of the plants was amazing. And I did nothing special. This was an all-in-one tank. This was actually ABT complete. This was the tank I was telling you guys about before. This is an all-in-one, extremely neglected. I didn't do much special stuff at all. Usually I'm in my tanks like 6 hours a day for competitions, trimming and pruning stuff. And this one I did nothing. I felt bad, but the plants grew like crazy. They were all healthy. I actually put fauna in it too, and they were healthy. But yeah, they just did their thing. The tank kind of did its thing, and I attribute that to setting it up right. You know, in the beginning, this was set up the same way I told you guys before, with the mineralized topsoil, capped with aqua soil with the osmocote, and then just dosing whenever I could remember, because I was going through a lot of stuff with work at the time, so I wasn't paying attention to my tanks, but I still wanted to enter a competition that year, of course, so ABT Complete did it. It kind of speaks for itself, like being able to talk about how much I neglected it. I would go like 2 or 3 weeks in between water changes sometimes, and if you guys keep CO2 supplemented tanks, you know that's like a no-no. Usually once a week is like minimum for water changes. In some of the competition tanks I do like 3 or 4 a week just to keep levels flat. So I mean, I grew plants in there even with a neglect, like Ammoniac crassicalis and stuff like that, like plants that are really hard to keep submerged. They were doing fine. So a lot of people, when they get into CO2 supplemented tanks, they aren't familiar. Like the reefers in here are gonna laugh, but people who do just the hops or whatever, they're not familiar with the plumbing and like the reactors and stuff like that. So like with this one, it was again set up right. Like I took the time and I set it up right, and it's just a little canister filter, but again, 45-gallon tank, didn't need much. But this right here, the reactor, that's where I diffuse the CO2. I don't know if you guys can see it, the little red pointer thing. But that's like the secret of the whole thing. That allows the CO2 to fully, 99% dissolve, fully saturated just about. So not only am I not wasting any CO2 by using this method of injection, but it's just so nice because there's no bubbles blowing through my tank. I don't have Sprite water. It's crazy, and all it is a PVC that's reverse plumbed, so the water actually flows down and out the bottom and then into the tank. So the gas naturally wants to rise, so the gas is continuously fighting that flow of the water. So the gas dissolves naturally, like it should, into the water and then gets taken into the tank. So it's really easy to build. Again, if you guys want to build it, I can give you the directions for it. Just message me, I don't mind. But it's super easy and effective, like really effective. That 5-pound tank, the 5-pound CO2 tank there, typically with traditional injection would last me like a month. With this, I was getting like 3 to 4 months out of a 5-pound tank. And the 20-pound tank that I have on it now, I don't think I've changed it. It's been like a year. So it's definitely the way to go. It all comes down to how you set it up in the beginning with these tanks, like reef tanks. I mean, you wouldn't just throw a bunch of live rock in there and then sink and float it with a hop and hope to have a good reef tank. You know, a lot of you guys who do the reefs, you know that you have to have these massive sumps with massive plumbing. You know, you take the time to set it up right, and that makes your life so much easier at the end. Sorry. Does anybody have any questions at all? Yeah.
Do you have any equipment that you use as a recommend for starting?
Yeah.
Reliable,
Yeah, I use Eheim filtration and Flugel filtration, and then mainly, I mean, I've switched to sumps primarily now.
for the CO2?
Oh, for the CO2, the regulator is GLA, Greenleaf Aquatics, but I like CO2 art as well.
Okay.
CO2 art's really nice. They're about the same price, but I believe CO2 art has a better needle valve. So.
Or do you use dual regulators?
No. Or yeah, like dual stage regulator. Yes. I thought you meant 2. Yeah. No, I do use dual stage regulators. The difference between dual stage regulator and a single stage regulator is a dual stage regulator, sorry, I'm like choking on something. A dual stage regulator will prevent end of tank dump. End of tank dump is when your tank gets so unpressurized that the regulator, the needle valve just, it fails basically, and it allows all the gas from the tank to dump into your fish tank, which gasses out your tank, and if you have fish, they will die. It'll just basically make your pH go super acidic. So the dual stage regulators prevent that and stop that from happening.
Because that's one of the debates, I mean, whether that's a real thing.
Yeah, I know. No, it's real. I have fish that if they could come back from the dead, they'll tell you it's real. But yeah, I guess we'll talk about that for a second too. Like the CO2, what kills fish with CO2 isn't the CO2, by the way. It's the pH drop. You can't inject enough CO2 to be toxic to fish. I mean, you can, but they'll die from the pH before they'll die from the CO2. The reason why they go up and gasp isn't because they need air. They're actually trying to get away from the pH drop. They're trying to find a way somewhere else.
Fly away.
They're trying to get out of there. That's why they usually jump out of your tank too, if you gas them out. So you don't necessarily have to have high light and do CO2. Some of the best tanks, and this is a Takashi Amano's method, was his method, this is the 88 method, is a low light, moderate light tank with CO2. You don't have to blast the plants with light. You can use a non-400 par light and just pick the right plants though. You know, you just have to go with plants that don't need 400 par light. And you'll have an amazing tank. Some of the best tanks I've ever kept with plants have been very simple plants with low light and lots of CO2. I didn't have any algae. The maintenance was like next to nothing because photosynthesis was capped out because the light was the main limiting factor. And it was just perfect. They're the easiest tanks. So if you're looking to start with CO2, start with the low light CO2, or low light, high CO2, moderate CO2 method. Like it's fail-proof. You get about 30 ppm of CO2 in there with the chart that I showed you guys before, and then just stay on it with maintenance, and it's simple, very, very simple. But that's only a 5-gallon tank too, so it's like the maintenance on it was nothing. And then non-CO2 supplement tanks, and this is comes back to these tanks are way harder to maintain and keep looking nice than the CO2 tanks. CO2 tanks, why they're more difficult, is because they're more demanding as far as maintenance. But these are actually hard to grow plants. Taking plants and putting them in an environment with CO2 as your limiting factor is asking for algae. But if you do it right, it's not. If you do it right, if you set it up correctly with the right surface agitation and the right plants going on, you're golden. We talked about this. CO2 does exist in non-CO2 supplement tanks. That's the tank that I just showed before. That was one of the ones I did for a competition. But it's non-CO2 injected because it's easier to handle once you figure out how to balance things. That's another one, just it's cut off at the bottom. Sajikas. And then nano stuff too, you know. If you guys, if room's an issue and you don't want to do like a big planted tank, you guys, that was super cool about the bowl show. That was really exciting. But stuff like that, you know, you can keep plants anywhere basically. They're not as demanding as fish. You can goof off with them. Wabikusas coming up here in a minute. I'll talk about this actually first. This is an anomaly. All these plants are plants that people said need CO2. That were on the internet like, oh, these plants need CO2. And I was like, no, they don't. So I set up these bins outside, and I set up a waterfall system where the water basically pours down into lava rock before it gets sucked back up by a pump and returned. And it's just this big system pouring onto this lava rock over and over and over again. And I was able to grow Amania crassicalis, Rotella, Mosier flora, Tanias, Seneganthus, all these plants that people swear, Erios, everything that they swear needed CO2. If you create the right environment, you're creating CO2. You're controlling that. Yeah, I got a hell of a lot of algae too, because it's direct Florida sun, but I found a way around that eventually. And immerse in the greenhouse, like I said, this is my preferred way to grow because you have no limiting factors. You know, like you don't have to worry about algae. You don't have to worry about is my CO2 right? Am I dosing this correctly? It's growing in dirt, or it's growing in a rock wool cotton with solution that you know what it is. So yeah, it's just easier and more fun. And you can still skate with it too. Like you can still do display tanks with immersed plants. Like you can still build out, you know, I wouldn't call it wabikusa because it's not, but you can still build out displays, and it's still fun. Like it still looks nice, and it's you know, nice to keep a vivarium style tank like that. That smells amazing. That plant. It's like one of the few aquatic plants that's actually fragrant. And when that flowered, my greenhouse smelled like rotting strawberries almost, like this weird sweet smell, but in like a good way. But it's just a cool plant, and submerged it's a neat plant too. But it doesn't do that submerged. And going out in nature and finding plants, I showed you guys the Erios already before. More Bacopa, and then Ludwigia palustris down there, Ludwigia super red. And then that. You guys don't have to worry about that up here, but down by me, those things are everywhere. They're like cockroaches. So they're not really, I'm not really afraid of them or whatever. And if you guys happen to go to Florida, you don't have to be afraid of them either. They're way more afraid of you than you could ever imagine. They don't really care about people at all. More Bacopa, and then Rotella. This right here is like a blight in Florida right now. It's Rotellifundria, but once it's immersed, it'll grow it's like a half a foot a day in all directions. So this thing will cover a bank of a lake and kill all the native plants. It does not care. And I'm talking all, even the thrush, like the tall cattails and stuff, it'll eventually kill those, even though they're taller than it. It's a nasty weed. And that comes back to responsibility of us. Like, if we keep these plants, we need to be responsible. Either destroy them, make sure they're gone, put them in a compost pile, don't throw them in a landfill, don't put them down your drain, destroy them some way, put them in your grill, burn them, dig a hole and bury them, I guess, like as long as it's like concrete and inert dirt and it doesn't get water. But yeah, they should be killed.
Is there any problem getting them out of the state or?
It depends,
other
yes.
places?
Yeah, it depends. Different states have different red lists, and we have a federal noxious weed list as well. It's good to check those, because there are plants that are on those lists that, you know, and USPS isn't going to open your packages and da-da-da-da-da, but you know, if someone reports you, that's when you have to worry about it. And some of these plants, they're legal to house, like Hygrophila polysperma or water crescent. You can't house them even. So if you do get reported for it and they come out, obviously you shipped it, you have it. So they come out and they find it. It's actually a big fine. I had to get a license to keep a couple of the plants that we do have because they are invasive. And yeah, that wasn't easy either. Like with FWC down where I am, because especially the crisis we're going through with all the invasive stuff. But up here, I'm not sure what that would entail. Each state's different. But yeah, you guys can. I actually was looking at your guys' red list last night before I went out with them this morning. So yeah. Before shipping stuff, I guess it's good to know. It's good to know what's on those lists, for sure. And each state is different. Hawaii is ridiculous. So if you have people asking for plants in Hawaii, good luck. And that's really about it. Like, you know, everywhere else, packages don't tend to get stopped, so you don't necessarily have to worry about it. But are you doing something ethical? So it's more so a battle of ethics than legalities, I guess. And wabikusa. This is slowly becoming like my preferred method now to actually display plants rather than doing the submerged stuff. It's just easier, again, with time being limited, and not being able to spend as much time as I'd like to on the competition tanks. This is a different route that I can take to express and be artistic. That's really all it is. But it's fun. You get to showcase the plants They're aquatic.
So, do you like maintain a certain water level for a lot of your stuff and that grows them as best?
Again, it's plant by plant. If you're talking with these guys here, there's actually no water in that base. If I can get, there was a lot of water in that one. This one's just safety sort, the oil dry stuff. It's just a bed of that I kept saturated, and then the ball itself, I misted. But originally it had a huge, like really good soaking, and the moss that I used to wrap that ball, I was already converted to immersed, so there was no, it's just basically insulating that ball. And with me misting it daily and being in my greenhouse, there was no loss of, no real evaporation. But as far as your original question, determining, it goes back to plant by plant. Different plants, like cryptocorynes and Cipadella brownae, they're generally like a more dry found plant. Some Spiralis, actually, not all cryptocorynes. Cryptocorynes won't grow out of water. But Spiralis is one that you'll find like yards away from actual water. So, this one was fun. I took just a basic bowl and then propped it up on the wood there, and then grew the plants out of it. And Studio Aquatica is my buddy Jack's company. They're trying to make something more Wabikusa, bring it more to the forefront of the hobby. So this is stuff that we were collaborating on. Basically combining aquascaping and Wabikusa, taking those two worlds and putting them together and getting emergent tanks. So you can have the ability of the non-limited growth of immersed with the ability of having your fish. So I think that's going to be my next setup, is going to be a bigger one of these. But now, do we have the Wabikusa stuff?
We're going to try.
We're going to try to do a Wabikusa demo. Originally, I had sent myself stuff via USPS, and it got delayed. So it may be at his house right now, but it's not here. So we had to call an audible, and we're going to do something a little different. I have no clue what I'm going to try to make this with. We'll try.